In this video, I have a fresh take on the infamous Jordan Peterson and as it relates to being a disciple or follower of Jesus. So I first learned about Jordan Peterson when most people did in Canada around 2017 when he opposed a bill called Bill C-16. And I'm not really too concerned with the bill because that's come and gone and that's old news. But one thing I remember is thinking, wow, this guy is having his 15 minutes of fame, being incredibly outspoken about some things, but he has a huge back catalog on YouTube of all his lectures online. He's making a big splash in Canada and internationally, and I want to know really a little bit more about this person. So I started watching his lectures, and I quickly learned that he had a biblical series lectures going through the book of Genesis. And as a pastor and as a biblical studies person, I was going through my master's at the time in biblical studies. I wanted to understand what he thought about the Bible and particularly Genesis. So every single day I would listen to chunks of his podcast where he would go through the entire book of Genesis, hours upon hours upon hours. And I was really impressed. I was impressed because what he was doing was he was bringing a different lens to the scriptures that I hadn't thought of before, which was a psychological lens, seeing things from the mind of people constructing the biblical texts. I may have disagreed with his presuppositions about the Bible and about the text, but I thought that the insights that he was gathering were quite unique and different. The fact that he was expressing something brand new to me in the biblical realm made me want to watch a lot of his videos. So I spent probably the better part of a year or two watching almost everything that he had put out and everything new that he was putting out. I was a little bit obsessed. I was obsessed because here's this guy who is making international news, who is seen as this really outspoken and argumentative kind of person when it comes to politics, also having a biblical interpretation on the Bible. He wasn't a Christian, but he believed that the Bible was still good and useful, and I hadn't come across that before, so I found that incredibly interesting. Fast forward a few years, it's now 2019, and I'm in New Zealand, which is where I'm at right now, and Jordan Peterson is about to come to New Zealand because he's on his tour. And I'm like, you know what? I might as well go and see what this is all about. So I bought a ticket, I went with a friend, and it was me and thousands of other people in this lecture hall. Massive room, and I was just completely surprised at how receptive the crowd was to him. I was disappointed because I didn't think that the things that he was saying were particularly revolutionary. I didn't think the things that he was saying were things that needed to be said, but I guess they've been forgotten for a long time. You see, Jordan Peterson is all about personal responsibility, cultivating the kind of person you want to be so that you can be somebody for somebody else. And for a large segment of the population, this was something that they knew was true, but didn't have somebody actually articulate it. And I wonder if that was the case because so many people have removed themselves or been removed from a church context where this kind of conversation is really prominent in churches, where this idea of personal responsibility, this idea of cultivating your inner self and having holy character and loving other people is actually one of the first things that we should do as Christians so that we can then go out and be a positive representation of what it looks like to be a real human and to be a real follower of Jesus, disciple of Jesus in the world. So the things that he was saying weren't completely new to me, really, at all. It was my entire education as a Christian up to that point. But I was a little bit disappointed because what he was talking about in his lectures were not revolutionary things. They weren't groundbreaking things. All he was doing was just stating the obvious, which is what most Christians have known for most of history, which it seems like the Western world has kind of forgotten. But here's my fresh take on Jordan Peterson. When I was in that room in Auckland, I was confronted with the reality that there are so many disciples of Jordan Peterson right now. They're riding the Jordan Peterson train. And I even knew a lot of Christians who were really more disciples of Jordan Peterson than they were disciples of Jesus. And what I thought was really fascinating but also disappointing was how easy it was for somebody who was saying so many obvious things in such a big platform could snatch up and gather around him so many people who were disciples of Jesus, who are now more aligned with him and his political philosophies than being disciples of Jesus. See, don't get me wrong, I like how he thinks. I think he is an honest thinker. I think that he is not scared to mention and talk about anything as long as he can think freely and openly about it, whether it's the Bible, politics, gender, any environmentalism, any controversial topic. He really just wants to talk about it, and I really appreciate that about him. However, I even felt this pull towards wanting to be more like his disciple than want to be more like Jesus' disciple. I found myself through up until that moment of going to see him in Auckland, actually listening to his podcast more than I probably listened to the Bible, watching his YouTube videos more than I actually read the Bible. And I found myself, like I think many Christians had found themselves and maybe still find themselves, in being more of a disciple of Peterson rather than a disciple of Jesus. This was completely weird to me because most of what he was saying were the outworkings of a biblical worldview or a Christian worldview. And it was like I was going to the messenger instead of going to the person who wrote the message. And I think the phenomenon of Jordan Peterson throughout the last 5 years has taught us this, that we need to be disciples of Jesus and not disciples of any other popular philosophy or popular worldview or popular person that sparks up in culture and in the world. But I want to know your thoughts, so comment down below what you think of Jordan Peterson as it relates to being a disciple of Jesus or a follower of Jesus.